Most people who tell me they're exhausted aren't actually tired, they're overdrawn. A good example of this was a recent appointment with a 47-year-old tech executive who walked into my office and took out his phone and flipped to his exercise app. And he said, I feel like I'm doing everything right, but nothing seems to be working. He wasn't really looking for help. He was looking for confirmation that if he just pushed a little harder, everything would finally start to click. He runs a tech company in San Diego, about 120 employees. 5 or 6 times a week, he does high intensity interval training. He does Peloton rides on the weekends. He has an Apple Watch on one wrist and an Oura Ring on the other. He's tracking HRV, he's tracking steps, and he's tracking training output. But interestingly, he hasn't really looked at his sleep data in a few months. His typical day looked like this: coffee at 5:30 in the morning. His first real food was around noon, and then dinner at about 8 or 8:30. Sleeping about 5.5 hours, maybe 6 on a good night. When I asked about the sleep, he said, I just don't seem to need much sleep. Every time I hear that, I get a little suspicious. His labs came back and looked like this. His fasting insulin was 14. We like to see this less than 10, and even better if it's less than 6. His triglycerides were 195. We like to see that less than 90. His HDL was 40, should be at least in the 60s. So his triglyceride to HDL ratio was 4.9, and we like to see that less than 1.5. In clinical practice, that ratio is one of the most revealing markers in metabolic medicine. It's more informative than LDL. It's more informative than total cholesterol. His HSCRP was 3.2. We want to see that less than 1. His morning cortisol was high normal. His testosterone was mid-low for his age. His ALT liver marker was at 48. Most labs say less than 40 is acceptable. We like to see it less than 25. So on paper, nothing catastrophic, nothing flashing red, but the pattern was actually unmistakable. On paper, he looked like someone doing everything right. In reality, his body was exhausted. This is important. This is a patient that was not lazy. He was not undisciplined. He was extremely driven. By conventional standards, he was doing more than most people ever will. And that was actually the problem, because the way he was thinking about metabolism was wrong. Not partially wrong, it was fundamentally wrong. He believed his body was a machine. Put in more work, restrict more input, push harder. Eventually, the machine will have to comply. But metabolism doesn't work like a machine. Your metabolism works more like an economy. Think about what a budget actually is. Money comes in, money goes out. If more goes out than comes in consistently, you end up in debt. And debt changes how the system behaves. Your body works exactly the same way, except the currency isn't dollars, the currency is energy. That energy funds your brain, your immune system, your hormone production, muscle repair, stress adaptation, and your body is constantly checking the books. This is how I explained it to him. I drew 2 columns on the whiteboard. On the left, I put withdrawals, sleep debt, work stress, alcohol, high intensity interval training, inflammation, late night eating. On the right, I put deposits, sleep, protein, sunlight, recovery, circadian rhythm. Then I asked him a simple question: which column looks more like your life? He stared at the board for a few seconds. Then he said, I've never thought about it this way. The largest withdrawal for him was sleep, consistently sleeping 5.5 hours instead of 7.5 or 8. That's not just missing rest, that's missing growth hormone secretion, brain clearing metabolic waste through the lymphatic system, insulin sensitivity resetting, mitochondria recovering. Sleep is not passive. Sleep is the largest metabolic deposit available. When you cut that deposit short, everything downstream becomes more expensive. Then layer in work stress. Running a 120-person company means constant decisions, managing people, managing uncertainty, managing revenue. Your body interprets all that through the same physiology it evolved for physical threat. Cortisol, sympathetic activation. Your body doesn't really distinguish between a tiger and an 11 p.m. email saying that everything just went wrong. That may sound exaggerated, but physically and physiologically, it's actually pretty accurate. Then there was the alcohol, 2 to 3 glasses of wine most nights. I'm moralizing here about wine, but metabolically, alcohol always gets processed first, which means fat burning pauses, sleep quality degrades, deep sleep drops, and alcohol itself raises cortisol. So the thing most people use to relax actually perpetuates the stress cycle. And then there was the training, 5 or 6 days a week of high intensity sessions per week. Sometimes even did some 2 days. This is where high performers often struggle to hear the truth. Exercise is actually withdrawal, or at least we call it a hormetic stressor. With proper recovery, it produces adaptation, but without recovery, it becomes an additional stress. Your body responds to signals, not effort. This is where the classic calories in and calories out model breaks down. It's not wrong, it's just incomplete. Your body constantly monitors energy availability. When that availability drops too low for too long, the body adapts. Thyroid output can decline, testosterone often drops, appetite increases, insulin resistance worsens, stored energy becomes protected. Your body, it's protecting itself. There was one more detail that actually explained a lot. He said, when I take a few days off from training, I get worse. I hear this quite a bit, actually. If I don't work out, I gain weight. Rest days make me feel worse. But that sensation is not proof that you need more training. By the way, we see this with people who go on vacation. Oftentimes when they relax, that relaxation is actually enough of an opportunity for the immune system to kick in and they actually get sick. So this is actually all evidence that the nervous system has adapted to the chronic stress. And the absence of that stressor feels like withdrawal, because in a physiological sense, it is. Eventually, I said something to him that kind of changed the conversation. I said, your metabolism isn't broken, it's overdrawn. He went quiet. Not uncomfortably quiet, but like a thinking quiet. Then he said, that's the first explanation that actually makes sense. He runs a company. He understands budgets, revenue, burn rate. He just had never applied the same logic to his physiology. The interesting thing is we didn't add anything initially. We reduced 2 training sessions per week. We worked on extending his sleep window towards 7.5 hours. We addressed the nightly alcohol. We shifted his meal timing earlier to better align with circadian biology. His instinct was resistance. This doesn't feel like enough. But 8 weeks later, his fasting insulin had dropped, his triglycerides were falling, morning energy had improved, he had lost 6 pounds without really deliberately. He came into his follow-up appointment and he said, I feel better doing less than I did when I was doing everything. That's not a paradox. That's what happens when an overdrawn account starts running a surplus. Most people trying to lose weight don't have a discipline problem. They have an energy management problem. If you do those 2 columns right now, withdrawals on the left and deposits on the right, which column would be longer? Most people already know the answer. They just haven't looked at it quite that way. So if you're curious where your energy budget stands, I've linked a short metabolic health quiz below. It takes just a couple minutes and it'll give you a good starting point for understanding whether your metabolism is running in a surplus or running dead. And if this was helpful, please like and subscribe. It helps us get this information out to more people. We'll see you next time.